everyone comes on. Now, you might have seen, just while we're waiting, I've got a donation button up there that is for those who wish to donate to the Rape and Domestic Violence Services Australia Incorporated. This way, you know, make the live stream count for something and go to a worthy cause. So that link is there if you wish to donate. You're not forced to, but you know, this, I thought, considering the topic about why don't murder victims just say who did it, it would be a way of honouring, I guess. Okay, so now we've got some people here. We're talking about why don't murder victims just say who did it. I actually put that question to Spirit because I was curious, you know, like, why is it sometimes, you know, you get so frustrated, why can't they just say who did it? I mean, that Sharon that came to me one day there, I didn't even know that there was this woman missing, and she said to me, her husband said he's the boss now, and as it turns out, he's the one that was arrested. They still haven't found her body, I believe, and she said that, you know, they're not going to listen to you, and they didn't. And in fact, when I rang the police and they said they were going to get the investigation people, whatever, to give me a call, I gave them my number, and the only ones who have my number are family and my staff. And there was this message, voicemail on my phone, and it was a man's voice. And he said one word, or two, bull bleep, and hung up. And I thought, oh, well, we know who that is. That is, you know, the ones that are in charge of this case. So they didn't want to know about it. But as it turns out, they arrested the husband. I guess in that respect, justice there was served. But this is the thing that I found out. Now, with Spirit, sometimes they can't remember. They say that it's very similar, like the death experience is very similar to a birth experience, where, I mean, you don't remember who was, you know, taking you out of your mother, if you want to be crude a little. You don't know what your mother looked like the moment that you were born. So as you're entering into the spirit realm, apparently that is very similar to what it's like leaving our world into the spirit realm. You know, if you're going at the hands of somebody, you know, depending on how this event took place or what you want to remember, like, you know, you think about us, sometimes we go through something traumatic, we don't want to remember, we want to forget, or we have this, you know, like we black it out, if that makes sense. And so sometimes with spirit, from what I've been told, that is what they want to do. They don't want to focus on that because it was too traumatic for them, or they just really don't remember, which is frustrating. So when you think about it, some of them have said, we don't care about what happened. I'm worried about my family, or I'm worried about, you know, not being able to have any peace if I am going through this. And some of them have already forgiven the people who have done this crime, this shocking crime. And that's, you know, because they say, what's it going to make any difference? We're not going to be able to come back. And then you say, well, what about closure for your family? Maybe it's best they don't know. You know, so what do you do with that? It is quite disturbing when you hear that with spirit, but this is where they say, you know, we can go through these events, but we don't want to talk about who did this because it's irrelevant now. We're no longer there. It's not going to bring us back. You know, no matter what that person serves, is not going to be justice really for what they did. Because they look at that as, that is like they've escaped their body. that trauma that they went through was that severe that their soul left their body. Sometimes their soul leaves their body before the actual final finality of their death takes place, if you want to put it that way. So they're like, I'm out of here, I can't deal with this. The soul has a limit. That's why you hear of some people, I don't know whether you've heard of the cases where they say if a person jumps off a building or something like that, they die halfway down, because sometimes that soul just wants to escape. They want to get out of that body. So it's like the realization or the shock itself, it kills them before they've actually hit the surface or whatever it might be. It's not just the air is sucked out of their lungs. It is also a case of, that's it, you know, they want out. So I guess in a way that's a blessing to know in disguise. Not that I want to try it and find out for myself. You fell asleep? Well, you're here, and I've only just started anyway. So don't worry, 𝓼𝓽𝓻𝓸𝓷𝓰. But I guess, you know, when I look at it from their perspective, they aren't worried. I mean, and I say, but you should be. This person needs to be accountable for what they did. They need to be brought to justice before they do that to somebody else. And there are some cases where the spirit will say they're not going to do it to anybody else. And you ask, what does that mean? Sometimes they say it's in the hands of fate. It's not in the hands of the police. It's not in the hands of the families. It's not in the hands of you or me. It's in the hands of fate. And when you think, you know, okay, does that mean that their karma is going to catch up with them? They pretty much say yes. If you want to call that fate, that is what's going to happen. So there you go. In a nutshell, this is why sometimes they don't say who did it, because it's irrelevant to them. As they said, it's not going to bring them back. Do you have any questions? This is different to what you're talking of. My sis had a cardiac arrest 2 weeks. What are we talking about here? 2 weeks ago in hospital. She hasn't spoken of what happened, but I hope a loved one made her come back. Okay. Well, there was a case when my grandmother went through like 10 times they had to bring her back. Well, they brought her back 10 times, but I feel that her soul wasn't ready. So 10 times she was revived because her heart gave way 10 times. One when they were doing like they were entering the stent, and then they had to pull the thing back out to be, you know, to revive her, and they gave, you know, those electric things, the paddles or whatever they call them. And I said to her, what did you see when you were passing over, like, you know, when you were dying? And she said, I didn't see anything except this lady taking photos of me. And what she was seeing was the doctor who had those paddle things on her, electrocuting her, because she was black from the neck down, completely black. And that was the electric thing. She was seeing the electricity in her eyes, if you want to put it that way. So that was, you know, it was amazing. But you know, the soul has to be ready. You think about these people who are in serious car accidents, and they say, how did they get out of this? You know, the car is a complete wreck. It's crushed beyond recognition. I mean, this car is ripped to pieces, and this person survived. You know, they've got a few broken bones or whatever, but they're alive. You know, it is really a case of, if your soul is not ready to go, I mean, you could have things happen. You can have accidents happen. You can have things that are meant to be signs from spirit, as, you know, maybe you're going down the wrong road in life. Maybe you need to take a detour every now and then. You know, we all have situations that happen in our life, whether it be directly involving us or someone close to us. You know, you think about how many people don't think about donating to, you know, like domestic violence lines or anything like that, or cancer things, until they've actually had a case of losing somebody to cancer or leukemia, or, you know, have had a relative who has been a victim of domestic violence or rape. Most don't give it a second thought until they've had a situation like that happen in their life. And then all of a sudden there's this awareness, this understanding that, you know, this is something we need to stop. This is something we need to, you know, get an answer or you know, some results for. Many of these, you know, cancer research and things like that, many of these started off through someone who had a personal experience one way or another. And some people, it takes them to have a near-death experience before they wake up and they think, you know, I can do things so much different in my life now. It's like the light's gone on. I realize what I'm here for. You know, and there are times where we're going to have, you know, people who have unfortunately been a victim. Many people, and this, when you think about it too, from what spirits say, that they don't want often their loved ones to know who did it, because it might affect them more. And the stats actually reveal that 9 times out of 10 a person is killed by someone they know. So can you imagine? I mean, even if it was like an accident, that things just got out of control, you know, someone pushed somebody, for example, or they were mucking around and it just went too far and ended up taking somebody's life. Maybe this is why spirits sometimes aren't saying who did it, because it's not just the exposure of that person coming to light, but it may even be that how will this impact their loved ones, the ones that are left around. You know, maybe this person they're thinking is going to have time to change their ways. Maybe, you know, once everything comes out, everyone will have moved on in their life in some way, and then they can deal with it then. But maybe they're just trying to deal with the fact that that person's been taken. Some people never get over it. Some people, you know, I'm talking about those here. Spirit, they're over things. The ones that are just, you know, there are ones that are angry. The main ones that are angry are the ones who feel like they've been ripped off, that it took so much courage for them to kill themselves, and then they've done it and they're still alive, and they're still seeing people suffering because of what they've done. You know, that's hard, but it's not a case of that they don't want anyone to know who's done anything. You know, I think in all reality too, like that Sharon said to me, they won't listen. They won't listen to you. They're not going to believe you. They're not going to do anything. And when I went to the office the day after and I got that phone call, I was just, you know, polishing the cabinet, the display cabinet, and I felt her around me and I started crying and I said, I'm sorry. I called them and they didn't want to know about it. They called up and they left a message saying bull bleep. And she said, I know. I told you. They won't listen. It's their ego. It's too big. The police want to be right. They don't want to be told by some psychic that this is where this person is, or this is who did it, because it makes their work look like they can't do it. So once authorities begin to think, okay, think outside the square. If they've got some really like long-standing cases where they're not getting anywhere with it, they've gone through everything, then you would think, okay, what is it going to hurt? Nothing we've done has brought an answer. Let's take a nosedive into the unknown. What will it hurt, the situation now? You know, that time when I rang up 𝓼𝓽𝓻 about 𝓍𝓬𝓪𝓷𝓰, and I gave them coordinates that were given to me, and the woman took them down. The very next day they're looking in the opposite direction. It's like they just don't want to listen. And then not long after that, that one that's been fired gets on and is saying, and we don't want psychics or mediums to ring up and say anything about this. So again, didn't want to know. Didn't want to know about it. And all I said is just have a look. You know, at the end of the day, I said, look, I don't want the bloody reward. I don't care about it. That's not why I'm calling you. It's because that family need closure. That mother, I can't imagine what that mother would be going through. And you were here in the live stream when I was doing that, what's her name? Madeline McCann. When I was doing that, the same voice of that little one that basically said they were William came through in that. I wasn't even calling out to 𝓍𝓬𝓪𝓷𝓰, and they came through. This child wants to be found. That's bottom line. And it's not just, you know, it's not just for the mother, it's not just for, you know, the foster parents or anything like that. It's for the child. It's what the bottom line is. But, you know, when authorities don't want to listen, what do? And the ones where they do have help and they do find an answer, they're like, oh, we do it all on our own. You know, we've had this breakthrough, and they take full credit for it, and good luck to them. As long as they get to the bottom of it, who cares? Who cares where the information came from, as long as they get to the bottom of it? But from my own experience, Sharon didn't want to listen. 𝓍𝓬𝓪𝓷𝓰 didn't want to listen. There was another case of the missing aircraft that I said to them is over in a place called, you know, it starts with O and it's in the mountains. There was this place called Oberon, and there was the plane. They said it wouldn't be over in that direction because that's not the flight path that they were going in. And I said to them, you know, because their aunt came to me, the pilot's aunt came to me and said, look, you're my reader, can you tell me anything? If I've got this map here of New South Wales, can you pinpoint where my nephew might be, because he's gone missing? And she said he was in a plane. She didn't tell me he was a pilot at that time. She just said he's in a plane. For all I knew, it could have been a big plane. But because I didn't have TV or radio, you know, didn't have time for all that and wasn't interested in television, I started seeing in my mind this image of this white little plane with a blue stripe down the side. I said, is it a small plane? She said, yes, it is. And I said, it's over here. And I circled on the map around in that area, and it was like not far from like it looked like a river or something, or a stream. And I said, there's a lot of trees there. It's going to be hard for them to find it, but it's in this area, in this vicinity. And then she gets onto the phone and she rings up the flight path police or whatever they call them. And the guy on the phone, he mocked me. Oh, you only know what the plane looks like because it's been on television on the news. You only know blah, 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 because, you know, it's been on television or it's been on the radio, whatever. And I said, I don't own a TV. And the aunt, she said she doesn't own a TV. There's no television here. She doesn't know. He said, oh, she's probably bought a paper or something. Can't win. I didn't have a paper. Why would I want to look at something depressing anyway? You know, there's enough depressing things around. I choose to be ignorant to a lot of it. Now, of course, you know that I'm older and I've got that news feed thing in Facebook. It's like the minute I go onto Facebook, I'm looking at all these depressing things. And because of the fact that, you know, because of the analytics, because I'm passionate about, you know, animals and stuff like that, and then I'm on Twitter, and then on Twitter I can't help but follow these people who are trying to stop, you know, the game hunters and stuff like this, you know, people who are killing animals, and of course I share that because I'm passionate about it, and I believe that, you know, whatever we put on our own page is a part of who we are as an individual. What we share on our page is what we are, the kind of person we are in some way. There's like parts of our personality that are being shared. If people don't like that, don't look at my page, because there are some depressing things there. Just a heads up if you've never looked at my page. So what have we got here? Crazy but could believe someone making it up. The first you mention you're a medium, they run for the hills. Imagine if they proved wrong. It never ceases to amaze me that people don't work or don't want to work with the divine to help. Sometimes I wish I had the ability to communicate with the spirit so I could use it to help in some way. Yep. You'd think so. I'm not sure if they used a psychic for Keisha in Mount Druitt. There may have been phone calls that, you know, were from people who were psychic. I didn't personally have anything to do with that. I was blissfully unaware. There are some things I just don't want to know, and so I don't get told. But yes, with this aircraft, it ended up being found, because the thing is, I actually said to them, if they get out there now, these people will be alive. And they said, what do you mean people? There's only one. I said, no, there's two. There's a young pilot and there's a friend of theirs, and one of them has a broken leg. Well, 2 weeks later, people hiking through the mountains and that, I don't know whether they were like, you know, part of some kind of group or something. They actually found the plane, and not far from the plane they found 2 bodies, and one of them had, you know, bone protruding from their leg. Thank God I wasn't given that vision. I just saw a broken leg, but I wasn't seeing any bones sticking out, and unfortunately they died of dehydration. But, you know, they didn't go in that direction. From what the airport police or whatever they called, I don't know. No, they didn't go in that direction. So we're not going to look in that direction. This is the direction that they were going. So there you go. I mean, I'm not gloating about it or anything like that. I'm just, you know, part of my language, I'm pissed off that they were too, you know, stubborn to even take a look. I mean, sure, it would have been hard because of the canopy of trees, and I could see this canopy of trees, but then it was sort of like I was being lowered somehow in my vision. I could see down that there was this plane, and it was like a small aircraft, a very small one of the wings broken off, you know, so it's obviously somehow got caught up in things and, you know, snapped. But what do you do? So whether it was, you know, I mean, this is the interesting thing too. I mean, at that time they weren't deceased, so yet these visions were coming to me. As soon as that woman said to me, can you help me locate my nephew. He went out in a plane. He hasn't been seen. Even she didn't know that there was somebody else with him. For all they knew at that time, he was alone, but there ended up being two. So there you go. And I never got a phone call of apology or anything from, you know, that guy who I spoke with who mocked me over the phone. Oh yeah, you become a real laughing stock. This is why I can't understand some people saying, oh, I'd love to have that gift. You get treated like you're crazy. You get treated like you should be locked up, you know, because you're talking to the dead, or you're seeing things, and because people don't want to accept that, you're not worthy of, you know, any type of, you know, it's not so much recognition, it's just acknowledgement. You know, you just get treated like a joke. And that's why, you know, sometimes, you know, be careful what you wish for, because if you do get any ability, I don't know whether people can develop an ability, because I've always had it. I didn't get training or anything like that, but it, you know, I'm so used to it. It's sort of like, you know, just a part of my life. There are some people who say they want a loved one to come through in a reading. I don't do just mediumship. I will never just do mediumship in a reading, because I can't make any guarantee that you're going to hear from somebody. It just doesn't work that way. Just because a person can see or hear spirit doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to have somebody want to come through and talk. Sometimes they just don't want to talk. So just keep that in mind. But with them, they do state, like as I said with Chris the other night, I said, well, why don't they just say who killed them? Wouldn't it make it so much easier? And then he said, and if they did, you could be accused of pointing the finger at somebody who is innocent. You don't know how that's going to affect the family. Could make it worse for the family to deal with. You could be causing someone to take their life because they can't handle that someone they know in their own family or their friend circle has taken their loved one from them. He said, Spirit, we know. Spirit knows what's best. We will either, you know, divulge it or we won't. And he said, and there are times when we don't remember. He said, just as we can choose in that life to forget things, we can also choose in this life to forget how we came into it. I guess that's why some of them don't want to talk about their death. You know, I don't know why anyone would. I know when I die, the last thing I'm going to be wanting to talk about is, you know, how I died. You know, if people don't believe that I'm there and I've got to convince them that this is how I died and stuff like that, then they're not going to believe it. And then you'll have people say, well, maybe you read up on how this person died. You know, you can't win. When people are determined to deny something, they will find every excuse possible to discredit or say that that person should, you know, they're not genuine or whatever. So it is really tough. Good night, Tammy. That's okay. Angela says, I feel like there should be a position in police forces for psychics, like the show Medium. It would help so many things and people need to stop cancelling it out. It's heartbreaking to know how many things could be helped or people being saved if they would just listen. Just a little bit of information. Medium is a TV show. Not everything in there was actually real. So a lot of it was just dramatization. She you know, she can talk to dead people, but I very much doubt, and from what I've been told by Spirit, no, she had not solved a lot of these cases as they're making her out to have been. Otherwise, she would still be working for the police. She would still be doing things, but at the moment, all she's doing is, you know, star signs. And you can't really predict star signs, because star signs are a personality, and you can't make a prediction on a personality. Unless you do Hermetic astrology, then that's different, because then you're looking at the way the planets were aligned up at the time of that person's birth and the time zone. And you've got to remember too, we have daylight savings, so everything is all thrown out. I remember doing a column for the Stars in the Hills newspaper. It's a local newspaper, the Hills, I think the Hillshire Times, the Hills, yeah, I think the Hillshire Times. I did a column, voluntary column. They asked if I would do the stars. I only did it a few times, and I thought, nah, because I wasn't doing it by a chart or anything like that. I was actually just asking Spirit, what can you see for those who are Aquarian? What can you see for people who are Sagittarian? Things like that. And then I would write these things down. Now, there were some people who were writing saying, I don't normally believe in the stars, but this was spot on. But it was too much for me. I mean, because you've got, I mean, think about it. You could have half a dozen people who are all Aquarian or all Sagittarian or Aries or whatever it might be. And not every single one of those are going to have the same kind of experience. Have you ever had anyone contact you from any missing planes of M16? I don't know whether you actually saw. There was one day I was using the Ovilus. The Ovilus is a tool, like a spirit box, and I thought, I paid all this money for this thing, got it from the US, and I've never used it. I've never really used it. So I thought I might take it out and, you know, put it down and see what comes through. And there was the mention of M16. So I thought, okay, I might hit record on my computer, my then computer, and see what, you know, comes through. And the weird thing was, as it was so weird the way that it even sounded on that recording. I'll get a link to it. Yeah, so when you listen to it, you'll notice the sound seems to like cut in and out like a walkie-talkie kind of thing, like it was so weird just the way it was coming through, and saying things like up, you know, and there was questions being tossed about. I remember people saying, oh, maybe aliens, you know, maybe UFO or something like that. And it was just weird. It actually told me at that time, before they found anything, that there were rocks off the French shores. And can you believe where they found a piece of the plane that had washed up? There were rocks, and it was on like the French shores. And that's actually in that thing. So, and it was so weird. I mean, it was like really intelligent responses. I was blown away because I didn't feel anyone around me per se, but because there were things coming through on that Ovilus, I mean, it's using phonics for Pete's sakes, like you know. So that was how it was, like putting words out and stuff like that. It does have a vocabulary in there, but there were certain things that were coming through. You thought, like I said, oh, I'm just going out for a minute. You keep talking. As soon as I got up, it said, sit down. But I still went out. Just let it talk. And it was saying things that, you know, were just incredible. So I transcribed it and put that on a video, and that's the video. So you'll be able to, you know, have a look at that and make of it what you will. Is it still in the air? Okay, I'm going to try a different phonetic. Okay, the Boeing 777-200ER, flight MH370. Are they alive? Are they alive? What happened to the flight? Is it a UFO? Are the people still alive? Who is responsible for flight MH370 going missing? What country is responsible? What country is responsible? shot down? Will they be found? Okay. Will passenger flight MH370 Malaysian Airlines be found? Please use this device. Talk to me. Will they be found? Will they be safe? Has Malaysian Airlines Boeing 777 been has it been abducted? Are the people alive on that plane? Or are they dead? A waste? Will they find the air? Will they? Okay, will they find the plane? Stones. Has it hit a mountain? Who's responsible for it? Has it gone in the ocean? How many people were on board? 7. Is that how many are alive? Is this a government thing that's happened? Is there anything political behind this? What happened to the Malaysian airline that's gone missing? How did it go missing? There was a trap. Where? Where are they going to find the plane, or will they find the plane? Are there any survivors? Talking to the computer. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I was pleasantly surprised. I bought that ages ago. I mean, they're quite expensive, nearly like $300 and something. And I took it out with me to a location, and this was an old cemetery, and it was a pioneer cemetery. And this was the one where during that particular visit, this spirit says that a gravedigger took their face.
What do you need to tell me? I'm afraid.
So I don't know what the story is there, but you know, it was quite interesting that they're saying this gravedigger took their face. But I mean, back in those days, sometimes they didn't have the like the prisoners or whatever, the convicts, they didn't put them in coffins all the time. So they'd actually put them in like a body bag or whatever, or you know, a blanket or what have you, and just put them in the ground. Now, if, and I'm only being hypothetical, if they had been digging or throwing the dirt in, it's quite possible, God, I feel like something's on my face. It's quite possible that the shovel might have hit the face of the body, which is, but this particular Ovilus M was actually going off, and I was ignoring it, and it was actually saying things. I would say, what's your name? And I'm listening to them around me. They would have this Ovilus M reply talking about these names and stuff like that. And
I feel that someone's right with me now. I'm feeling my throat going because you're actually right next to me. This is when my throat starts to go like this. I know that you're right near me. What is your name? What do you need to tell me?
the funny thing was, later on, I actually went back and I wasn't paying any attention to it. I was only listening to what I was, you know, it was just for the recording, because I bought the thing, I might as well use it. And when I went back there, there was actually a Barry White, which was on the headstone as we drove in through the entrance. And I thought, wow, Barry White, or Barry Waite, W-A-I-T-E. It kept coming up on the other list.
What is your name?
And I thought, well, there you go. There is something that this is actually being able to use anyway. I mean, spirits obviously can use it. I tried that missing aircraft just to see what it would come up and say. And it gave some really interesting things. It said it would be located, or it's on some, area where there's a lot of rocks. And they found part of the plane actually in an area where there were a lot of rocks. And this was an island, something to do with the French, and it came up on there about the French. So you can actually have a look in the High Priestess YouTube with the missing aircraft video, and you can listen to that too. I put a few subtitles up of what was being said. So, car accidents and when people are left as a basic vegetable and on life support to keep them alive, are they ready to go or not? They usually get their life support turned off. Just from wondering, just sparked as my sister's friend had her life support turned off a few days ago after a car accident. Okay, Sarah, I've actually had a few spirits that have been in this situation. There are ones that are usually stating that when they're ready, they're giving their loved ones the courage to say yes. I'll give you an example. When my grandfather was in a 3-stage coma and he could hear everything going on, my grandmother felt hesitation in signing that paper to say yes, turn off the thing, because they also wanted to use his body parts, and he could hear them saying that he wasn't ready to go. And he connected with my grandmother in a certain way, because when they're in a coma or whatever, or being kept alive on a machine, their soul can communicate to those around them. His soul connected with me, saying, get the priest to pray over me, get them to pray. I was only a little kid at that time, and I remember when I got home, I opened up the Bible randomly, just pointed, and it said, get the elders of the church to anoint the sick and pray over them. And I went into my grandmother's room and I said, we've got to do this for Pa. And she said, okay. So he went to a different church than my grandmother. His minister said, you know, well, if it's God's will, he's going to go. And my grandmother's minister said, have faith. God can do anything. And I turned to my grandfather's minister and said, you don't really believe in miracles, do you? You've got little faith in God. And he was taken back at this little kid telling him that, but that was the truth. And the very next day, because my grandmother did not sign that paper because she felt in her gut, no, I can't sign this. There wasn't meant to happen. The very next day, my grandfather moved his little pinky and he came out of the coma. And the first words were, God bless you. And he then told us what he could hear and what he could feel and stuff like that. So his soul was not ready to go, and he was letting my grandmother know, no, do not sign that. I'm not ready. If your loved one, or if your friend's loved one was saying, you know, okay, we'll do this, then her soul was ready to go, and she would have given them that nudge to say, sign it, because I'm not here. I'm not in that body now. I have to go. So I feel that her soul was already at peace, and she wanted to, you know, relieve that from your friends, from her loved ones. So I've had a few who've actually said they will let their loved ones know one way or another. And then I applied that with my grandfather when he was, you know, encouraging my grandmother at that time. He didn't remember, but he said to me, yeah, I probably would have said, don't you dare. But there you go. So she was ready. She was ready to go. And that was why they had the courage then to turn off that machine and free that soul completely. So I hope that gives you some comfort, Sarah, or at least gives your friends some comfort. Lauren says, is it harder for spirit to communicate or talk about their deaths the longer they're on the other side? I've heard you use the expression behind the veil before, and I was wondering if it gets more difficult to communicate the further behind they are. What do spirit do with the rest of their existence? Well, okay, let me try and put it into layman's terms as simply as I can. When I say that they're more behind the veil, see, there is how can I put it? Try and simplify it. It's like being in a room with somebody. Okay, so this is like, you know, say you've got someone right next to you and they're no longer here, but they are spirit. They're right next to you. So their energy is a lot stronger because they're here. And then going behind the veil, it's sort of like a gradual move out of that room into another room. You can still hear them, but sometimes it becomes a little muffled. So the longer that they're over, the more that veil begins to close, which means that they're more safe. And the majority of those that are here already, some go completely behind the veil straight away, but there are many that stay because they're there for their loved ones. If a person passes away and they don't have any loved ones here, no one to grieve for them, that type of thing, they're straight over on the other side. There is no hanging around here or anything like that. They're ready. They're already behind that veil. But gradually they get behind that veil. Like my mother, there was one time when she came to speak to me, and I said, Mum, you sound like you're a million miles away. It's just hard to hear you. And then she'd say, can you hear me now? I'm yelling. And it's because of the fact that, you know, and even when she was around, I couldn't really feel her. And this is the thing, you know, when a person passes away, you might feel that they're around you in some form. You'll have little feelings like, you know, that they're there or whatever. And that's because their energy is still in this world. It's not completely behind the veil. Once it gets behind the veil, it's like they're not in the same room with you, if you want to put it that way. They could be, but they're in a bubble, basically, like in a membrane that is you're not feeling their energy. You're not feeling you're not getting the scent. If they were like a strong perfume and stuff, you know, sometimes depending on when that veil thins and they come close, they can actually have their scent. You know, like if they had a certain perfume, you might have this smell that reminds you all of a sudden of that person who's passed over. And that is where they, you know, are there because of that thinning of the veil. It doesn't mean that they're not there when you're not thinking of them or whatever, because they can be there, but their energy isn't felt as strong because it's like that membrane or a wall, if you want to put it that way. Like you could feel someone next to you, say someone's like sitting on the same sofa as you. You'll feel them moving as they, you know, just to get comfortable. You might feel them push up against you, things like that. And not in so many ways will you feel that with spirit, but you'll have this knowing that someone's with you. You might just get this feeling like someone's looking at you, and you'll turn around and you'll think, no one's there. I'm just imagining it. But there is. And this may be a loved one. Sometimes you could be washing up and then all of a sudden you'll get, you know, lost in thought about, you know, things that you used to say with a certain loved one or do with a certain loved one. And it's like you're having like a little daydream. But you're not, because that one is actually there telling you, reminding you of these moments. Remember when we used to do this? Remember this silly moment when we, you know, when we drank too much or whatever it might be. They're reminding you. That's why you will have these moments of, you know, suddenly remembering someone out of the blue who is no longer with us. So, yep, this is, you know, eventually you won't feel that energy, but it doesn't mean that they are gone. Doesn't mean that they're no longer visiting you. It's just that, you know, they become more behind that veil because you no longer really need that support because you've become stronger. They left when your spirit was strong enough to deal with things. So keep that in mind. There are some who are around you, and even when you're having a reading, and you might be, you know, wanting that person to come through and talk to you in that reading, and they might say, look, no, this is not going to help you if I start communicating through this reading, because you need to move on. You need to let go. So there are times where they'll say, please don't say that I'm here. And that's a fact. There are a lot of times where I've heard spirits say, please don't say that I'm around. I'm not there to really, you know, I can't keep filling that void. And so if there are times where they won't communicate, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. if anything, it means they love you because they want you to heal. And with a reading, if you're going to a medium, they might know you better than you know yourself. That, okay, if this person does say that I'm here, this person is not going to stop. It's never going to be enough, which means that their soul is not going to heal strong enough for them to move on the way that they're meant to move on. Because I was only here for a certain amount of time in this person's life, and I have a purpose, of being in that person's life for whatever reason. And now I have a purpose to stand back and let them heal so that they can live out the rest of their life, knowing that had it not been for me moving out of the picture in some way, shape or form, their life wouldn't now be more determined to make a difference or to make some type of change. And it's hard. And even, you think about our pets, they come into our life for a reason. They teach us empathy. They teach us how to feel. Many of us, and there are a lot of people out there, they'll cry over losing a pet before they cry over losing a loved one. Or a partner. They might have a bit of a tear, but, if they think about how much that pet may have meant to them or, things like that, there's a lot of people who are more devoted to their animals than they are to people in their life. I mean, some of us will get over, a person who has hurt our feelings or broken our heart. It's like, that's it. They're gone, but that pet is everything. So it's not so much, 𝓢𝓽𝓻, harder for them to communicate or talk about their deaths the longer that they're on the other side. It's just that, why do they want to keep going over it? If you think about that, would you want to keep talking about the day you were born? And especially think about it this way. If that discussion about their death is going to upset somebody, why would you want to continually upset that person by going over the way that you died? And as Spirit said, there are things they choose to forget too, that they don't want people to be remembering them through their death. They want them to remember what they were like when they were alive, like the things that they contributed. If all their life sums up to is the way that they tragically died or whatever, then who wants to be remembered that way? So hopefully that helps you to understand that they just want to move on too, that they don't want to be living in that moment. They're free from that moment. So does that make sense to you? Do spirits come back closer if they really want to stay with loved ones, or do they fade away? Well, they don't fade away. They don't fade away. Thankfully, they don't fade away. They can come back closer. Like when you're going through some really hard times, they will come around you as a way of support. And there are times where in those occasions you might be feeling like you can't go on, and they will give you that strength that you need. They don't abandon you. So no, they don't fade away. As I mentioned, once they get more behind that veil, you won't feel them as much, and that might give you the impression that they've faded away, or you forget how they sound, or you forget how they look and things like that. But that's because they're behind that veil. So the more that they are behind that veil, the less you're going to feel their energy, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. So as I said, it's like them being in another part of the house, in another room, and unless they're like yelling or whatever, you might still be unaware that they're there. Angela says, is it possible for a spirit to start a song on your phone or anything electronic around you? Yes. I had an incident like 3 times over where I hadn't even touched my phone and my granddad's favourite song from a movie came on and nothing was even opened on my phone. Yes, they can. Absolutely. I've had occasions where, like when my mother passed away, I'll give you a good example. I got this corner nook for the computer and everything. It had just been delivered. And I remember, you know, the ex saying to me, why don't you set it up? You know, it'll take your mind off the loss of your mum. Because we hadn't even had the funeral or anything at that point, and it had only been like 1 day that she'd been gone. So of course I was having a bit of trouble dealing with that. And yes, just because I'm a psychic medium doesn't mean I still don't have feelings too. And I think, okay, now that physical presence is no longer there, everything is spirit form, which, you know, is not the same. But anyway, cut a long story short, I'm setting up the corner computer desk and had the speakers tied up. They weren't plugged in or anything, because remember those times when we used to have like the external speakers for the, you know, the computer that you'd have put up on the shelf or whatever, or on the wall. And all of a sudden talkback radio started coming through these speakers, and my mother loved talkback radio, so that was my sign from her that she was around. I remember when that happened, my middle daughter and my other half at the time were in the same room, in the living room, and I'd set up the desk in there, and I said, do you hear that? And they both looked and they said, oh my God, it's talkback. I said, yep, Mum's here. Mum's giving me the sign that she's here. And as soon as I acknowledged, the music or the radio sound went off. It wasn't even plugged into power. So yes, they can do that. They can make your lights dimmer. They can cause, you know, things to flicker. They can cause phones to ring. You can have messages on your answering machine from a loved one who has left a message for you from the other side. I remember my grandfather, his message was bugger me because no one had answered, and it went to the answering machine, and all you could hear was my grandfather. You could hear this crackling sound, and then you hear his voice saying, oh, bugger me. And then he hung up. And he'd been over for about 10 years when this happened. So it didn't work, the phone call. But yes, they can. Absolutely.